I am recording this introduction after having recorded the body of the episode, which, when you have got a bit of an illness, as I do, that's affecting your voice, is a very, very dicey proposition, okay? But I've got just enough left to tell you. We're talking about Fontaines, DC. We're talking about some other interesting new music that's cooking right now. And we're going into very, very deeply why your boy is having a rough go these days, kids. And we'll get to it on the other side. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. I don't know how much I've got in me this week. You catch me at what is known in the medical profession as a rough go. I'm in the midst of what they call a rough go, more colloquially, a hell of a time. Take your pick. If you are clinical, you can call it a rough go. If not, if you're more street level, you can call it a hell of a time. But you also catch me when I'm feeling rather smug and hip, because finally, I am getting around to listening to Fontaines, DC, and that makes me one of the cool kids, all right? Now, why am I suddenly listening to Fontaines, DC? And the answer is that this week is St. Paddy's Day. So, in anticipation of that celebration of all things Irish, thought I'd dig into a little bit of Irish music, very topical, very current. I try to be current, and relevant. So I'm digging around and I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Fontaines, DC. All right, now Fontaines, DC is a band formed in Dublin, and they have been probably, over the past 5 years or so, the biggest and most substantial and most relevant Irish musical export. They've gone around the world, this band Fontaines, DC, and I was hip to them, all right? I had them on my radar because I listened to Blind Boy. And Blind Boy is, of course, Irish, and that guy has his finger on the proverbial pulse. And so he has talked on his podcast before about Fontaines, DC. And so you kind of file that in the back of your head. You think, I'll check that band out at some point, because I am something of not exactly a connoisseur, but certainly a consumer of new music. And I try to stay with it, all right, not getting any younger. Took a look in the bathroom mirror just this morning when I could raise my half-crocked neck to see my own face. We'll talk about some of this. Replaced a light bulb in the bathroom, which is much whiter and brighter than what was there before, and was startled to see just how much that gray is streaking. I can't even call it my temples anymore. It's mostly my whole freaking head. And this is a big birthday year, kids, and so it is not that surprising to find myself aging. But one of the ways in which you keep yourself young, which I am now old enough to understand, is keeping hip with some of the young music. Okay, a lot of people check out of music like the day they turn 20 or 22. It's either the day you leave high school or perhaps the day you leave post-secondary education. And all of a sudden, music has been kind of a frivolity. Your teenage years, you can make music a priority. You've got that time, you've got that space, you got your Walkman, and you put on your cassette tapes, right? And music is a part of your life. And then all of a sudden, you graduate high school, maybe you go into the work world, you graduate college, you move on, and a couple of things happen, all right? There are a couple of phenomena at work. One is the 5 to 10 year cycle of your favorite bands or favorite genre is ending. And that's the way it goes, man. I think musical genre, musical movements are largely attached to youth, and then the youth age out of that movement, and what comes behind it is either diametrically opposed to what was cool when you were a kid, and it's just gone, right? I mean, this is obviously my experience as a person who came into his own during the glam metal days, right? There was that, what turned out to be quite a long run, actually, like 82 to 92. Although the hardcore glam part of it was probably like 87 to 92. Let's not get wrapped up in the date line. What follows it is grunge, and that is a much, much different thing, which held its nose at the music of my youth. And the music of that youth is very much different. And so you people, you age out of, and your genre, your style ages out with it. And so there isn't a lot of new music being produced in the style to which you are accustomed. And it kind of fades out on you, or you stay kind of locked in the genre that you grew up with as a teenager, So some of us, people of my generation, people of my vintage, may have just hung around the 80s, early 90s and stayed there. Did not move on with the music. And I was, to a certain extent, guilty of that too. The 90s, I largely checked out of music because that's exactly what happened. I was not into the new sound. I stayed with my sound. But as I was still in university and still poking around campuses, I was exposed through my friends to some other styles of music. I got into bands like the Archers of Loaf. I got into bands like Face to Face. I was exposed to other kinds of music, and that kept me a little bit with the zeitgeist, right? A lot of people don't do that, and so the bands of their youth fade away. That sound fades away. Some bands try to capture the new sound, and it does not work. A lot of glam metal bands from the late 80s, early 90s, in the mid-90s, cut their hair and released albums that sounded or tried to sound a little bit grunge. For the most part, that did not work. And those bands produced a lot of music that their fans consider the worst of their catalog. But most bands just disappeared, right? So that happens. You age out, your bands age out, the new thing comes along, and then you're in your 20s. And suddenly, that free time and free attention you had for music disappears because you're in the work world now, and you've got these pressures, and you're paying rent. Maybe you were lucky enough to have a mortgage. Maybe you got married. Maybe you had a kid. Maybe you had 2 kids. Maybe you've got a car payment. Maybe you're wearing a shirt and tie. All of a sudden, you just don't have time for new music anymore. That happens, all right? I've seen that happen. That happened to me. Happens to lots and lots and lots of people, right? One of the ways to stay young is to try to keep your finger just a little bit on the pulse. Now, I lost the pulse for many, many years. That's the way life goes, man. But as I came back in as a drummer in my early 30s, when I got back into playing again, and then eventually started playing with people, those people tended to be younger, and they brought their music back into my life. I got to hear some of the new stuff. Then I was doing a music blog, so I'm interviewing people who are touring, and the people who are touring tend to be the people who are releasing new music. So I kind of found my way back into the community that way. Where was I going with this? I don't even freaking remember. All that to say that one of the hot things right now is Fontaines, DC, all right? This band from Ireland. Blind Boy has talked about, and I have not really listened to until now, but as it is St. Patrick's Week, I say, as St. Patrick would himself, let's dig into the new sound, Jack. Let's dig into the new sound, Paddy. Now, as far as I can tell, there is a thing going on in the Irish music scene, and it's probably not exclusive to Ireland. This is probably happening in the UK. It's probably happening in Europe. There seems to be this movement, while we over in North America are just deluged and beat over the head with really lame, all the same freaking pop music. There seems to be this thing happening over there. And, if the trends continue, it'll probably begin happening over here in about 15 minutes, where there's like a noise rock kind of thing beginning to happen. you know, my histories are superficial. My cultural observances tend to be superficial as well. But I've been poking around a little bit. There seems to be this movement happening where there's guitar rock, which is reminiscent of 90s indie rock. And what's happening is people are playing that kind of music, but then kind of talking over top of it. A lot of vocalists seem to be doing more talking than singing, almost like poetry set to music, but not like the beatniks. It's not like jazz music. It's 90s flavored indie rock, and the vocalist will just talk over it. And I've heard this sort of thing before. This is not a new concept. I can remember 10 years ago when I was still trying to play video games, and I was always playing FIFA. FIFA was a big one for me. I was more of a sports gamer than anything else. You play FIFA, and they would have soundtrack. As football is a global game, they would have a global soundtrack, and there would be bands that had this kind of style. Right? This is not a new thing. And when I was listening to Fontaines DC, I was hearkening back to 10 or 12 years ago and some of the music I was hearing on those soundtracks. But apparently it's a thing now. There are bands in Ireland or coming out of Ireland like Gilliband, which you may have heard of, or Silverbacks. These bands playing noise rock, indie rock with the speaking vocal over the top. And to be perfectly honest, I don't really love it. I don't really love that stuff. The thing for me is that I need music with hooks, all right? I need music with melodies. I'm all down for the indie rock. I'm all down even for the noise rock. And we know I love the art rock stuff that you get from the War on Drugs or from Bon Iver or whatever. But those songs are very melodic. There are hooks in those songs. And cut me some freaking slack, Jack, all right? I come from the 80s glam metal scene. What is the audio signature of 80s glam music? Big ass, catchy choruses with big vocal harmonies. All right, this is the style I come from. That is the music of my formative years. All right, and so I still attach to that. And I need the music I listen to have some kind of melodic hook. All right, and this, for me, superficially at least, looking at this movement that seems to be happening, what I like about this band Fontaines DC is that they do that indie rock style and more of a spoken vocal, but there's some singing happening too. All right, there's more, for me, melody in some of the music that I'm hearing from Fontaines DC than I have heard in some of the other bands that are kind of part of this scene as well. I'm not as cool as I'm trying to let on like I am. Right? I've not listened to a lot of this music. I am not hip to this underground. It's not underground anymore. Fontaines DC is a world touring, world renowned, big time selling, big time stage playing rock and roll outfit. All right. I'm just late to the party on it, but I finally checked out Fontaines DC, and you know what? I really, really like it. I really, really like a lot of it, more than I like some of this other noise rock with a speaking vocal stuff that's going on over there. And this band is making, like, I probably should have talked about them a long time before this, because they are making substantial waves. They are being lumped into, they are being mentioned in the same breath as important bands like The Cure, like Oasis, like Joy Division, like Radiohead, like The Smiths. They're being mentioned in that category in terms of their sound, in terms of their potential relevance. And I'm all for it, man, because what we have here, remember, I'm coming from a North American context where so much of the music we hear is auto-tuned, bland, pop music. I'm all for people playing guitars and playing drums and people playing basses and people writing and performing songs this way. You know, this is rock music. This is garage rock music. This is indie rock music. And we know that I am down with all that stuff. So I checked out a bunch of Fontaines DC. Incidentally, I think they were called Fontaines initially, and then it turns out there was a band in the States called Fontaines, And that old thing happened, that Bush X thing, that Ghost BC thing, where Fontaines had to do something to alter their name. And so they call themselves now Fontaines DC Dublin City because they were formed in Dublin. All right. Just a little bit of trivia there for you. They've released 3 records. All right. Their first album, Doggerel, was 2019, and that was a big freaking deal. All right. That was an album that announced them as an important musical force. And I've not listened in depth to it, but it's a big indie rock record. You know, if you were into, I think whatever was happening kind of in the 2000s, like the Strokes and that kind of stuff, I think it follows that kind of line. All right. And then they released A Hero's Death in 2020. And then their most recent record is Skinty Fia, released in 2022. And that's where I started. And it's interesting because there's a big song, several big songs from that record. They've released a bunch of singles. I mean, this has been out for a while. Again, I'm late to the party. There's this tune on there, which I think might have been the first single, which is called Jackie Down the Line. And I'm recommending that you go listen to or go watch the video for Jackie Down the Line by Fontaines DC, because this tune is capturing the essence of what I like about this band. I call this noise rock, and I call it indie rock, and I think my audience is savvy enough to get a sense of what that is. I'm not sure how noise rock, their most recent couple of albums, are. Noise rock to me is just like big, loud, probably slightly out of tune guitars and like a distorted vocal over, like big, loud, noisy rock. This is far more subtle than that. It's got a shoegaze kind of side to it. You guys familiar with the whole shoegaze thing? This is a style of music that, again, this is all what they're calling post-punk. And we've talked about this before. We talked about the bands that came out of the late 70s into the early 80s after the fall of punk that took this punk DIY ethos, but expanded on the sounds. And there was this sort of style of playing where the bass guitar would drive a lot of this music. We've talked about it. We've talked about Joy Division. We talked about the early 80s stuff. We talked about The Cure. We talked about et cetera, when I talked about the whole goth thing. The bass kind of drives a lot of this music, and then the guitar plays ambience over top or noodly stuff over top or just noise over top. But the melody and what drives the songs tends to be the bass guitar and the drums, right? This music is very much like that. And the music on Skinty Fia, the song Jackie Down the Line, it's shoegaze music, as I was saying. Sorry, I'm really scattered, folks. As I said, I'm having a hell of a time. I'm on some heavy-duty cold meds. My brain, my voice, a lot of it's a little bit scattered. We'll talk. Shoegaze, the term for this music, comes from these bands that are playing with sonic textures. So it might be an indie rock kind of sound, but there's a lot of guitar effects happening. And they call it shoegaze because the guitar players are always looking down at their feet, always looking down at their pedal boards to set up and tap the pedals for the next guitar effect, right? So you don't even see the guitar player's eyes throughout the show. He's gazing at his shoes to make these different sounds, all right? But a lot of the shoegaze music was kind of trancey as well. So it would be, a couple of chords kind of just repeating this ostinato kind of thing and playing these sounds, these tones, these textures over top of it. There's a lot of that happening in Fontaines DC, all right? A lot of the music is 1, 2, 3 chords, and not super elaborate or technical. It's very understated. It's very chill in a lot of ways. The first record, I think, is a little bit different. Again, it's got more of a big garage rock, indie rock kind of vibe. Subsequent albums have become, I think, a little bit more refined, right? And dark and moody. And that's what I like about it. And it's very interesting because a year or so ago, our old friend Justin Hawkins of Justin Hawkins Rides Again and, of course, The Darkness, he reviewed this song, Jackie Down the Line, when it came out. And he was not super pleased with it at all. No, he loved the first Fontaines DC record, Doggerel, the big garage rock, indie rock album, right? The debut. And it is a much more upbeat, much more jangly, much more jump up and down kind of an album, okay? And Justin Hawkins loved that record, did not so much love Jackie Down the Line. Didn't like that it was a little bit subdued. Seemed to him, I think, to be a little bit boring. But for me, that's the one I like. I like the moody stuff, right? I like the atmosphere. And if you're going to have an understated kind of vocal, a gentle, kind of almost disconnected kind of vocal, I need the music to carry a certain hook for me. And I really am drawn to the dark music. And I think as they're going on, Fontaines DC is kind of refining their sound into this dark vibe. And you hear it on Jackie Down the Line. And you hear it on other songs on this record. I Love You, Roman Holiday. This is a dark album, and it's got so much vibe and it's got so much atmosphere, right? It's a driving record. We've talked about this kind of thing before. It's like a ease your seat back, you know, and drive down that highway and just listen to this kind of shoegazy, indie rock, chill kind of vibe. And I really dig it. And I dig it because there's some singing going on. It's subtle. All right. It is subtle. The singer is Grian Chatten. I think I'm saying that properly. And I really dig the drummer. Drummer is a cat called Tom Call. And, you know, it's indie rock, so you can kind of get a sense of what the drums might sound like. But he has a way of doing just little subtle things here and there. What he might do on the bell of a ride cymbal, for example, or with an effects cymbal, something like that. I really dig his style of playing. And I really like some of this music. You know, I don't love all of it. Sometimes, and I'm not accusing Fontaines DC of this, but sometimes you get a band of this variety that will play kind of obtuse sounding, dissonant sounding music for the sake of it, like just trying to be obtuse and dissonant. It's a little bit self-indulgent. Sometimes you get weird for the sake of weird and not weird for a purpose, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? Sometimes I get a read like that off of some of these bands. Like, we're going out of our way to not be catchy. We're going out of our way to not have a hook here. You know, we're going out of our way to seem really intense and artistic. I don't get that vibe off these guys at all. I think what they're doing is intentional and deliberate. I don't love all of it, but the more they get into this dark sounding, shoegazy kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of atmosphere happening here. There's nothing anthemic. It's all very chill, but I think it really works and I like it a lot. And I went online because I like to go see the live show, you know, and they've done a few appearances on KEXP. And if you're not watching on YouTube, KEXP's channel, this is an indie radio station and they have all the bands come in. They have a great studio to capture and record live performance. And they'll just have the band come in, you know, sit down. It's like Tiny Desk in that sense, but it's a full band and they'll play 4 or 5 songs and they'll be interviewed by one of the hosts and that'll be their segment. And they did an appearance on KEXP. After this record came out, they played a few songs and just good, just like really, really good. You know, there are comparisons to Joy Division and I hear it in the vocal delivery. Grian Chatten has kind of a lower voice, you know. On some of the songs, he delivers a lower voice that to me is a little bit reminiscent of Ian Curtis. He has a similar kind of stage presence, not quite as kinetic, but a lower kind of register and moody, a little bit dark. I think the lyrics are really, really good. These guys they bonded over poetry, apparently. They were in music school and they bonded over a love of poetry. So there's a lot of stream of consciousness kind of lyrics. I haven't dug too deep into the lyrics. Again, when I talked about Steel Panther a couple weeks ago, it's not usually about the lyrics to me. It's about the music and the melodies, you know? So it is with Fontaines DC. There is an Ian Curtis vibe from Joy Division about the vocal performance, and I think the band is good. And I mean, musically, I think they're good players. And what they're doing is this hip indie thing. And even at my advancing age, you know, you can get into the hip indie thing. And so I'm recommending that you go and check out Fontaines DC. Go watch their appearance on KXP, probably 2022. There's a few of them, so that's the most recent one. Incidentally, The War on Drugs has a couple of great performances on KXP. Really, really great little resource for checking out bands that you don't hear on your commercial freaking radio station, all right? Don't get me started on the commercial freaking radio station, but I'm digging Fontaines DC, and I'm feeling really young and hip and cool, even though I'm way late to the party, even knowing that this band exists. So if you're like me and you are firmly entrenched in middle age and you want to feel young and cool and with it and part of the scene, go listen to Fontaines DC, all right? The album I dig, Skinty Fia. A Hero's Death is really good too. I've not gone deep. A Hero's Death starts with a song called I Don't Belong, which really captures this, all right? I'm going to say start with Jackie Down the Line. If you like the moody, dark stuff, if you're more into the garage rock stuff, go listen to Doggerel, the first record, which is, all of their records are critically acclaimed, but that one was like a real announcement, you know? So if you're into that kind of garage rock, upbeat vibe, check that out. If you're into the moody shoegaze stuff, start with Jackie Down the Line. Listen to the entire Skinty Fia record. Check out I Don't Belong from A Hero's Death. I think this is a cool band. And it's one of those bands that I suspect it was cool to like a couple years ago, and now they've become popular. So if you're one of these frou-frou, I make art rock, I make noise for the sake of noise, you probably turn up your nose at Fontaines DC now. Screw those people. Screw them all. All right. Go check out Fontaines DC. It is getting the John Huff Podcast seal of approval. Not that anybody needs my seal of approval, but I like a lot of this music. And it's really dark. And I dig dark. I dig dark with purpose. Cool lyrics. And I think you might like it too. So check it out. Let me know what you think. All right. The reason I'm having what is colloquially known as a hell of a time, where do I begin? I begin what is becoming over 6 weeks ago when I just suddenly had the back spasms come back. Back spasms is not new. Talked about the back spasms before. This goes back 20 years now to an injury at the gym. Got trapped under a squat, which is not a pleasant experience. It wasn't even a heavy squat, but my lower back was tired from doing some work the day before, and it just I don't know, the angle was just so that my back kind of gave out. I had to be rescued by a guy. I don't even want to remember this. It was awful. I spent the better part of a week laying on the floor after that. Was diagnosed with an injury to my sacroiliac joint on the left-hand side. And from that day forward, my back and my life have not been the same, you know? I frequently have rounds of back spasms. There have been a couple of times when those have put me on the floor. That is a very rare thing. And I do my best to take care of my back, you know, core work, some yoga, stretching. I'm trying to do that. And I still get flare-ups. It happens regularly. I mean, I'm not the only person with lower back pain, that's for sure. Still get flare-ups, and they happen, and I manage them. And in 3 days, 4 days, they go away and life goes on. But this is now persisting for over 6 weeks now. These spasms that just won't go, like they almost go away. And then a couple of things have happened where it seemed as though we were on the upward trajectory, and then dumb stuff has happened that knocked me right back down again. It's so frustrating. Like a couple weeks ago, things are feeling a bit better. Things are loosening up. I'm getting some mobility back. You know, I can drive the car. I don't have trouble getting in and out of the car so much. And then it's midnight on a Friday or something like that, and two of my cats just get into an almighty fight, like a real deal cat fight. And that does not happen often. It's twice that it's happened. And in each case, it's happened because a foreign cat appeared on the radar. So I'm getting ready to pack up the house for the night. One of my cats is looking out the window. Then his tail blows up. You've seen that before? Tail blows up, starts doing this huffy thing. No pun intended. And I'm like, uh-oh, something's up. There's probably a cat out there. I kind of take a peek out the window. One of my other cats checks it out. And then doesn't this cat jump up on the window ledge? Cat jumps up on the window ledge. 2 of my 3 cats go for it because, that's cats. And what I have observed in a multi-cat household is that when it's go time, cats will just fight. Cats will fight whatever is in front of them. One time I was in the yard. We were a 2-cat household at that point. We had Millie, the big girl, and we had little B, and a cat came into the backyard. Now, I take the cats out. I have them on leashes, just like a doggy, and that's our compromise. I don't have the heart to let them run wild anymore. I get too worried. I just don't have the stomach for it. As I get older, I become more fragile that way. So the compromise is, take them out in the yard on leashes. They get used to it. They're cool with it. Fine, right? So they're in the yard, and B is this tiny little 8-pound thing. And this cat comes into the yard, and B starts like spiking up the way they do. And Millie, the big girl, the street cat, she's watching from the distance. And then this cat comes into the yard, gets just close enough to B that it looks like a threat. And then Millie just takes off. From the deck, whoosh, just like this tornado. And you can't stop that train, all right? She's a big girl. You couldn't stop her momentum if you tried. And she just goes after this cat, protecting B, ostensibly, mostly protecting her territory, but then protecting little B. The invader cat runs away with Millie's claws in its butt. And I'm like, okay, she's got the yard covered. But then she whirls around and jumps on little B. It's go time. So cats will fight anybody who's fightable, whether that cat is responsible or not, all right? So this cat jumps up on the window ledge. Big Millie goes for it. Frank goes for it. Cat jumps away, but it's on. Cats just see red, and they will fight whatever is in front of them. And so Millie and Frank turned on each other. It's the middle of the night. And so there's a full-on cat fight. If you've ever heard a cat fight in the yard, that is chilling stuff. Put it in your living room, all right? And then little Gertrude, the third wheel, always gets wrapped up in this. If you've ever seen like a fight in a cartoon where it's just a hurricane starts and then you just see fists and boots coming out of it, and then whatever's within, the radius, whatever's within the circle just gets pulled in. That's Gert. Little Gertrude gets just pulled in. And at this point, I'm like 4 weeks in to back spasms. I'm not moving around well. I'm being very careful, but it's getting better. I'm getting some mobility, but then it just kicks in. 2 of my cats start full on for real fighting, not play fighting, not hissing at each other, but pawing gently. A full on, I'm going to rip your head off your body cat fight in my living room. And so I jump, right? I dive in. To separate the 2, I grab Millie, I drag her away because she's going to kill somebody or herself. And it's this huge schmozzle, and I get them separated, and it's chaos, and like stuff leaked out of it was bad. It was bad news. And I get peace restored, and then I'm like, oh no. Oh, I tripped my back there. It's like those mothers that lift up a car when their kid is trapped underneath it, like some latent thing, instinct, animal, reptilian, kicks in and your body just does the stuff. You're not thinking anymore. And it all happens so quickly. It's like lightning strike, man. All of a sudden my cats are fighting in the living room. I just jumped in to separate them, stop it, protect them, whatever. My maternal instinct kicked in. And despite the back spasms, I just leapt in. And the adrenaline covered it until it was over. And then, oh no, I did it again. So my progress from the past couple weeks, was halted and reversed, knocked straight back down. You can hear in my voice that I also have a cold. That's another wrinkle in this story that's coming. Anyways, so I got knocked back, kind of back down to 0. all over again with the back because I just re-injured it, breaking up freaking cat fight. Are you kidding me? A cat fight? That's a couple weeks ago. On we go. My wife is gone. She's just returned from Portugal at the time. She has brought with her a head cold, of course. We think a head cold. I know what you're thinking. And anytime you get the symptoms, it's kind of almost safe to assume COVID now. We didn't test because what's the point? So I either have a head cold or I have COVID again. Okay, life goes on. I fended off her cold for a week or so. And then about a week ago, I felt the throat starting. I was like, oh man. Okay, we're going to add this to the wrinkle, right? So the back is beginning to feel better again. It's beginning to get there. Doing the yoga, protecting it, trying not to sit for too long, doing all the things. And then I get this cold. Now, my wife, when she had it, a lot of horrendous coughing. And I'm like, coughing's not going to be good for my back, dude. Like, I feel sneezes coming and I'm like, oh no. Like, whatever it takes to stop a sneeze, you stop it. It's like having broken ribs. This is going to be awful. And in my case, a healthy sneeze knocks my back to zero again, right? Incidentally, I do have a doctor's appointment booked. All right, we're going to do some imaging. We're going to figure it out. Cold kicks in, but the coughing hasn't. That's fine. All right, so just last night, again, the back is beginning to feel better. We're at like 60%, all right? That's what we're talking about. But it's trending upwards since the cat thing. It's getting back. And I do a bit of yoga and I do a bit of stretching, about an hour before bed. And then something in my neck just goes. Pretty sure it's just a pulled muscle in the upper back. Like everything is so fragile. Everything is so fragile in my back and it's all connected, right? You get muscles in spasm, that affects all the other muscles, all right? It's just a chain thing, right? The posterior chain. Something goes in my neck, like bad. Like, oh man, now I can't turn my head. I got this pain in my upper back. I got this pain in my lower back. How am I going to freaking sleep tonight? And if you're like me, if you are existentially inclined, you begin to look at all of this objectively. Back, now my neck. I got this cold happening. Like what? You know, they say that March comes in like a lion, and it has. Weather-wise, the worst weather we've had this winter has been in the last week and a half, 2 weeks. Like the winter's been really soft, hardly any snow at all. And then like 2 big dumps of snow. It's cold. It's like February and March. It sucks, man. That is not helping. Those of us who dabble in seasonal affective disorder, not really enjoying March so far. But my whole 2023 has come in like a lion, okay? This happened, and you're looking at it objectively, like, what is the message here? And I don't know what it's like for you, but if you have chronic pain, it's freaking exhausting, man. Like, the amount of energy it takes to be in pain all the time, and then to try and keep your head okay mentally, like, it's a huge drain. It's physically exhausting to be just in pain all the time, stiff all the time. It's rough and it can erode you mentally really, really quickly and really, really heavily. And I've been lucky. Like I've been pretty good so far. Like my spirits have been okay. This sucks, but you know, I've been able to keep a pretty good perspective on it and keep working. You know, I'm producing the podcast. As I talked about a while ago now, I played a show where they had to put my shoes on my feet for me. But I'm still trying to do it, right? But you begin to question, is there a bigger message here? And you tell yourself, you know, when I get over this, when I get past this, I'm really going to attack life. Boy, there's going to be no stopping me. I don't know if you're like that. If you get a sickness, or you get an injury, it's like you kind of step back, take stock. These are all the things that are going to change when this is over, man. It's beginning to feel like that, though, because this is unprecedented. Like for my back pain to be continuing like this. And then, of course, the cat thing knocks me back again. I'm building all this up to last night. I pull a muscle in my upper back, a trap maybe, my neck. I'm like, what is happening here? What is the freaking message? And I have not sorted that out. Maybe there isn't one. Sometimes stuff just happens, man. In this case, it's like I've been feeling for a while on the cusp of great change. Is this related to that? Is all of this stuff a manifestation physically of the anxiety that I was suffering through January? That's the thing. 2023 came in like a freaking lion. That insane bout of anxiety that I had again happened. And then flip the calendar over to February and the back thing happens. And is the back thing an extension or a physical manifestation of the anxiety that I was feeling? I don't know. I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes here. I don't want to get too existential. But if you're me, you start to think that way. Like, what's the bigger thing here? Is there more going on? And maybe there is. I don't know. Like, maybe there's more going on physically and we're going to find out. But maybe there's something in this that is a call, again, to a kind of reflection and a call to change. I don't know for sure. I begin to think that way. So the neck is gone, right? The back is doing better, but then I got the neck thing. Like, how am I going to sleep tonight? And can I? And like, I put my head down and I can't lift. Like, it's bad. Like, the neck thing is not great. The back thing is not great. And sleeping has been difficult anyways because of the back. How do you get into a comfortable position? How do you get into a position that's not going to make it worse, you know? And this just goes on and on and on and on. I go to bed and doesn't the coughing begin to kick in? It's not just that the coughing is annoying, kids. It is not just that the coughing keeps you up at night. If you are nursing a back injury, coughing, like sneezing, is not good. And so the coughing began to kick in last night and I could not shake it. You can hear it in my voice today that my voice is not there. And I've had to stop this presentation several times to cough and hack. Anyways, last night I start the coughing and every time you cough, like the lower back just goes, it's not good. And at a certain point, I'm on my knees on the floor, draped across the bed with my upper body, trying to protect my back, trying to support myself without my back, coughing, and it knocks me right back down again. A cat fight. What are the freaking chances? A cat fight knocks me down. Last night, just coughing knocks me back down again. Today, the back is not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it's just like a repeated, and the neck is a little bit looser, so it's okay. But it's just like a repeated pounding. My back is taking a repeated pounding. My body is taking a repeated pounding. And now you've got like the coughing happening, a little bit tired, sick. You know, the whole thing is a rough spot. The whole thing is a hell of a time. So I'm having a hell of a time. And when I sat down here to record this, I didn't know if I would have it in me to get an episode together, but it looks like I've come far enough to do that. You know, the measure of an episode is how long it is. If I don't get 30 minutes, it's not an episode. Doesn't matter if it's 30 minutes of spun gold. And what it means is that I can't go a whole hell of a lot farther, but what I can do is tell you that if you have been inspired and impressed by my resilience to sit down here, despite the crocked neck, despite the crocked back, despite the crocked voice and the illness. If you've been impressed and inspired that I've sat down to record an episode despite that, maybe you'll be interested in supporting the show on Patreon. I am milking the sympathy card. Want to warm my cockles? Want to make my back feel better? Patreon.com/John Huff Podcast. I have one tier of membership. It is $5 a month. And in signing up for that membership, you are saying, hey man, I appreciate the work you're doing. I am entertained. I am educated. I am inspired. I have my cockles warmed by hearing what you do every week. I appreciate this program and the work that you put into it. And as an expression of that appreciation, here is a $5 a month membership. Patreon.com/John Huff Podcast. I don't have a whole lot of voice left to say that I don't want to do ad reads and I don't want to do sponsorships. I find those things intrusive on podcasts. I find it annoying when I want to listen to a show and I got to sit through 5 minutes of commercials first. And then every 7 minutes, there's another run of commercials from our sponsors. I don't like that. I don't want to do it to you. But, you know, I do want to make this show into a thing. And, if I could turn it into a job, that would be freaking amazing. And Patreon is a way to begin doing that. Merch is another way, by the way. Those of you who like to support bands by buying their shirts, because that money, for the most part, unless they're on a 360-degree deal, goes right into the artist's pocket. I have merch. I have t-shirts. I have mugs. They are super cool. john-huff.com/shop. Go get yourself a nice t-shirt. Very easy ordering systems. There's some cool stuff there. Or sign up for the Patreon. You want to help me that way? That's great. And you know what? If you don't want to do Patreon, you don't want to buy merch, that's totally fine. All right? I'm not here to wring your wallet. You want to help me out? Share the episodes, please. Consider leaving a rating and review on your preferred podcast platform, preferably a positive one. All of that helps me. Go tell somebody. Word of mouth is still the best advertising. You can follow me on Facebook, The John Huff Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at John Huff Podcast. You can follow me on TikTok at John Huff Podcast. Please do that. Please share the episodes. As a bare minimum, what I ask of you is to tell a friend. You got people who like new music. You got people who like podcasts. You like people who just want to hear a friendly voice once in a while, make them feel not quite so alone. Tip them off to the podcast, and you have my eternal gratitude for doing any or all of that stuff. Before I go, there is a new song released, I think in the past week or so, by the great and powerful Killing Joke. If you want to be, you're not going to check out the hip new music, check out new versions of the hip old music. Killing Joke has been around since the 80s. They are kind of a proto-goth band, kind of a proto-industrial band. All right. They are right out of that post-punk movement. And their song, Love Like Blood, is one of my favorite songs of all time. I have talked about it before. Dig on the Killing Joke. It's that dark, industrial, heavy, indie. I don't know if indie is the right word. Indie is a classification and indie is a genre. We talked about that before too, man. Everything old is new again. Killing Joke has a new tune. It is called Full Spectrum Dominance. This is also a dark band and a bit of a creepy band in some cases, a little bit sinister. These guys were releasing tunes like Love Like Blood when Poison was doing Talk Dirty to Me. You know what I mean? Two very, very different things, two very different vibes, But I dig Killing Joke. Great guitar tones in this song. It's a very prototypical Killing Joke song, all right? It's a rock song for sure. It's got a dark edge to it, driving guitars, driving drums, this kind of haunting vocal over top. Killing Joke is a legendary freaking band. And, last week I talked about Extreme having a new song. We talked about Metallica having a new song. Those are legendary bands in their style and in their own right. Killing Joke is a legendary band and a very, very influential band on things that came after it. Noise rock stuff, industrial stuff. A lot of that stuff finds its roots in Killing Joke. A lot of you listeners probably are into Killing Joke already and have listened to their stuff for 40 freaking years. Well, they're back and they're still crushing it, man. This is a heavy rock and roll song, just like Extreme, just like Metallica, showing no signs of aging out here, man. They are still playing heavy. They're still playing fast. They're still playing dark. They're still playing on the cutting edge. I dig this Killing Joke song, Full Spectrum Dominance, and I will put it, of course, on the John Huff Podcast, referenced on the podcast playlist on 2023 playlist on Spotify. I will put as well some Fontaines DC on there. And my voice is pretty much cooked. I don't know if I can go any further, but we did it, man. We got to an episode. I'm stoked about that. Go listen to Fontaines DC. Tell me what you think. Go listen to the new Killing Joke song. Tell me what you think. Drop me a line. Let me know if there's stuff I should be listening to. Let me know if there's stuff you want me to talk about. I'm always trying to make the show better, man. So if you have feedback on it, please drop me a line and let me know. I'm having a rough go, kids. Warm my cockles. Send me a message that says how great I am. I have just enough voice left, just enough to say good things happen when you put yourself out there. Gonna shut up, shutting up, and hey, I'll check you later. Yeah. I think I'm done talking now. I am Jackie down the line. I can maybe sing in a band, something like that. Once I can, move and speak again. Happy St. Patty's, everyone.